start this. Okay, we'll clip this on you and we'll get started, and then I'll get off. I have a clicker.
Thank you. All right, hello everybody. My name is Andrew Barker. If you don't already know me, I am the Director of Cybersecurity here at Temple & Associates. We're going to be giving a presentation today with the help of ConnectWise. This is Jason. He's going to be doing the bulk of the presentation, but we're just going to get started here with a quick slide. If you're not familiar with all of Temple's services, I just wanted to quickly show you the different areas. Today we're going to be focusing on the cybersecurity element, but we can also do data center, cloud, managed service, managed security services. And across the bottom here, this is fairly new for Temple. Our project management office is what we use to drive every single project and engagement with our customers. And it's really taken us to a whole new level as a company. So not much else to say here. Again, we're going to focus on security, and I'm going to hand it over to Jason. Jason.
I thought we were going to talk about economic theory, von Mises and that kind of stuff, right? Keynesian economics, Thomas Sowell, that stuff. My name is Jason McNew, as I mentioned before. I'm a certified information systems security professional. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. And I spent a bunch of time when I was in the Air Force at the White House Communications Agency, Camp David Special Missions Command. So the environment I came from, I used to working in buildings with no windows, surrounded by barbed wire and machine guns and that kind of stuff. Sort of these extreme security environments, things that were secret, top secret, TSSCI, special access programs, that kind of stuff. So I did that for many years, and I went back and I got my graduate degree from Penn State in Master of Professional Studies in Information Sciences, Cybersecurity. And in 2017, I started a small consulting practice, which was acquired by Appalachian Technologies. And after that, I came to work for ConnectWise. So 1998, don't get into strangers' cars, don't meet people from the internet. 2017, literally summoned strangers from the internet to get into their car. We're talking about, of course, about Uber and Lyft and some of these other ride-sharing services here. And the reason I bring this up because it points out two things. The technology's advanced rapidly in the last 20, 25 years. And a couple of us are Gen Xers. There was no internet when we were kids. There was no internet at all, right? Remember corded phones, pick it up and you're tethered to the wall and all that stuff. There was no internet. And then in addition to that, attitudes towards privacy and security are different from generation to generation. So the attitude of consumers towards security, towards privacy now is very different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And this is something that we have to take into account when we're dealing with cybersecurity, which is a business problem. So what is cybersecurity? And this is sort of an academic definition, and I'm going to go ahead and read this. Cybersecurity is the body of technologies, processes, and practices designed to protect computers, handheld and other internet-connected devices, networks, programs, and data from attack, damage, or unauthorized access. Okay, that's all well and good. And that's something, again, you might have to memorize for a class or for an exam or something like that. But cybersecurity is about managing risk. Cybersecurity is the business of managing risk. And for most businesses, small businesses in particular, cybersecurity is going to be a cost center, just like safety is or just like OSHA is. There's any number of other things you do that actually subtract from the bottom line. You're mainly focused on service delivery, making some kind of a widget project or service or something like that. So cybersecurity is ancillary to this. And it only makes sense to the extent that it reduces business risk or saves money. Internet users distribution in the world 2021. You might be surprised. Does this statistic surprise anybody? Only 6.7% of the world's internet users are actually in North America. Does that surprise anybody? Would you have guessed it was higher than that? It's pretty low, isn't it? Most of them are in Asia, Europe, Africa. And by that same token, interestingly enough, internet world penetration rates, North America 93.9%. So despite the fact that the United States or North America rather, only has 7% of the world's internet users, we're the primary target and the primary destination for most of the internet crime globally. So the threats are coming mostly from overseas. The overwhelming majority of them are coming from overseas. And there's a lot of reasons for this, and things like this don't happen overnight. Think about, I'm a big history and philosophy guy, so think about, for all of its other failings, what we call STEM education now in the communist bloc was actually very, very good, right? These kids were doing trigonometry and advanced mathematics in 7th and 8th grade. And even with the collapse of the Soviet Union, that's still true in Eastern Europe and Russia. Their STEM education is very good. So you have people who are smart, they're well educated, they have a lack of economic opportunity, and then, well, you turn on TV and you say, well, Americans are all rich, they have, beautiful husbands and wives and pretty kids and nice cars and all that stuff, and they think, well, and I'm not trying to make light of that, but when you're looking at a crime, you have to look at motivation and get inside the threat actor's head and figure out, well, what is it that they're thinking about? So there's a certain rationale behind this. And then in addition to that, the laws in all these jurisdictions are not the same. In the United States or most of the developed world, whether it's the UK or Europe or South Korea, Japan, Australia, there are legal prohibitions against hacking both inside and outside of that particular country. Hacking is illegal. It doesn't matter. I can't, as an American citizen, hack Russians or hack Chinese or North Koreans, or even if they're our strategic competitors or enemies or whatever you want to call them. But that fact is not true everywhere. So let's say that you're in, Russia or Belarus or something like that, and you set up a crime shop and you're hacking Americans. It's not illegal in those jurisdictions. There's no laws against it, so they're not going to do anything about it unless you're hitting the wrong people and attracting the wrong kind of attention. So, and these shops are very mindful of that, and I'll get into how sophisticated they are in a minute here, but my key point is there are reasons why these circumstances exist, and they kind of go way back to post-World War, even before World War II, and then into the Cold War is kind of how we got here. So this is going to be our agenda. We're going to talk about top security concerns for the small to mid-sized business, and small to mid-sized businesses have different concerns than larger businesses do. We're going to talk about SIEM, security information, event monitoring, and MDR. Benefits of managed detection and response, and we're going to talk about security risk assessments, which is something that's extremely important. And then we'll close up with a couple of brief words on cybersecurity insurance. All organizations are being targeted by financially motivated organized crime actors. So there are two basic criteria for target selection. Do they think you have money, and do they think they could steal it? That's it. It's not personal. For the most part. I mean, sometimes they do target specific enterprises, but you could be doing, God's work or the devil's work. You could be running an orphanage or greedy private equity, right? They don't care. They don't care. And then, again, look at it from their perspective. Like I said, you could be sitting in Eastern Europe or Russia or something like that, and you're poor, and you think, well, the streets of America are, paved with gold. I'm going to pull me a little Robin Hood and get some for myself. That's kind of the rationale here. The gap between the number of breaches seen by small and large organizations has become less pronounced over the last couple of years. And the reason for that is that the criminals have realized that small businesses are not well defended like big businesses are. I mean, good luck attacking Boeing or Lockheed Martin or Apple or something like that, Nabisco. Any Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 company is going to be a very difficult nut to crack. But the small to mid-sized businesses, they just don't have the protections in place the enterprise environments do. So here's some statistics from the 2022 Verizon data breach investigation report. Anybody read this thing? And it comes out annually. It's been out every year since 2008. And Jim, we get real excited over this, right? It's like getting the Sears catalog at Christmas. Look through this thing. But according to Verizon, and I agree with this, we see these statistics all the time in various things, and you don't always agree with statistics, and sometimes the statistics don't agree with each other. But being a practitioner, I think that these ones are about right. And according to Verizon, there are 4 key paths leading to the compromise of your estate, and the first one is credentials. And when we talk about credentials, we mean usernames and passwords. And the problem with usernames and passwords is that they're easy to steal. There's technical ways to do it. You can use brute force attacks, rainbow tables. You can use social engineering attacks. And having done penetration testing myself, I could tell you that brute force attacks run automated. You don't even have to attend that stuff. The next one down here they have is phishing. And the reason that phishing still happens, I think the last time I looked at the statistic, it's something like 84% of the email that is traversing the globe daily is going to be junk mail or phishing email of some kind. And the reason they do this is it's the same exact reason. Who gets junk mail at home, right? It's the same. It's because marketing firms know that if you send out 100,000 of these things, maybe 3,000 people are going to take a look at it, and now those 3,000 people, maybe 30 will convert, and it's mathematically feasible to do this. This is simply the law of averages. That's it. It's the law of averages. And spamming people, spamming is dirt cheap and it's easy to do. There's very little risk. So it's the same exact proposition. They know, okay, well, if we send out 1 million emails, we're going to get maybe 30,000 dummies to click on it, and out of those 30,000 dummies, some of them aren't going to be patched, and we're going to be able to deploy this payload, and then we're going to own the computer. So I don't think that's going to end anytime soon. By the way, when you think about email, the underlying protocol sets were designed in the 70s, SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, Post Office Protocol. These things were never intended to do what they're doing now. This would be almost like getting yourself a 55 or a 57 Chevy and then putting ABS and airbags in it and traction control and stuff. I mean, it's kind of a best effort sort of a thing as far as securing this goes. Exploit vulnerabilities. The first thing that comes to mind here is going to be some type of malicious payload or phishing email, spamming, that kind of thing. But an exploit vulnerability could also be exploiting vulnerabilities in human social engineering. And then the last piece here is botnets. Anybody know what botnets? Not you and not you. You know what a botnet is? Okay. Well, a botnet is why criminals are interested in your grandmother's computer or interested in the computer or the back door of a candy shop or something like that. And the reason is you break into the computer and then they'll look and they're like, okay, well, this is nothing, there's nothing here. This is grandma's computer, it's useless. So what they do is they install a back door. And then what you do is you compromise 10,000 of these or 100,000 of these. And then what you do is you connect these all back to what's called a command and control server. And now I'm controlling an army of these robot computers that I could use to attack something else. So let's say I want to attack something big, like Bank of America or just whatever. I want to. There's a news site that I don't like what they're publishing, and I want to do a distributed denial of service attack. I go into my command and control server, and I have 100,000 bots in here, and they all start trying to log into this thing at once. It crashes. Incidentally, you could go onto the dark web and you could rent botnets by the hour like a cheap motel in a bad neighborhood. You'd pay a couple of Bitcoin, you could use the botnet to do whatever you want. They don't log anything, they do not, it's don't ask, don't tell. They do not care what you do with it at all. Interesting business model. No organization is safe without a plan to handle all of these things. So threat report security concepts, these are some common concepts that you would, if you're taking the CISSP or Security Plus or any kind of security track, but these are some of the things in the Verizon report. Assets is anything that has value in a company. It's really anything that's worth protecting or worth putting some kind of protections around in order to protect it. We're talking about cybersecurity mainly, we think in terms of data. It could be PII, PHI, proprietary information, customer lists, trade secrets. But this also includes people and computers and servers and machinery or whatever. So anything that needs to be protected from a threat. A threat is anything that has the potential to damage an asset. And there's two basic categories of threats. There's man-made threats or human-made threats, and then natural disasters. We just had a tornado just by the airport here. Isn't that crazy? And then look at what's going on up in Vermont right now. They're having massive flooding. They got 6 to 8 inches of rain. You look down on the coast of Florida, you get these hurricanes from time to time. So there's both man-made disasters and natural disasters are both threats. Vulnerabilities are openings or weaknesses in a system, and it could be something that's unpatched, something that's end of life, something that's not configured properly. But a vulnerability could also be a human that repeatedly does dumb things. And you may have read about this. There are some people that no matter how much you train them, they keep clicking on phishing email no matter what you do. And if that's the case at some point, then we have to make some type of a decision. And the way we handle that in the government is we just revoke their system access. You say you have no more system access, go tell your boss you can't do your job, and then you let the boss deal with it. But a vulnerability could be weaknesses in a system, and it could be improperly trained humans or people that make bad decisions or people that are just frankly not so smart or whatever. An exploit is the process of taking advantage of a vulnerability to attack. And an exploit, again, this could be something that's automated. It could be a piece of software, a piece of malware, but it could also be making phone calls, sneaking into a building. I have a friend that lives near me that does that, by the way. He's an unassuming guy like me. He's about my height, and he dresses up like the UPS man, and they pay him to do this, or the fire chief, whatever, and then he sneaks into a building and then steals servers or installs equipment on the network and that kind of stuff. He does physical penetration testing, and he showed me some of the videos. They're really funny because he's dressed up like the UPS guy, and he goes to the receptionist and he tells the lady, well, I'm here to blah, 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 and she says, right in. And then 5 minutes later, you see him walking out the door with a server. They don't stop him, and that's the penetration test. He said it makes him really nervous every single time. Ransomware as a service. These organized crime outfits that are overseas or wherever they are, I wish this fan wasn't on, that's really loud. They look, smell, act, taste, and operate exactly like a real business. They have project engineers, they have managers, they have financial targets, they have help desk technicians, they have all these things. They really operate like an actual business. It's just what they're doing is unethical and it's immoral. They're robbing people. But again, keep in mind, it might not necessarily be illegal where they are. It might be there's no legal sanctions against it. And if you're robbing American businesses or British businesses or Australian businesses, the authorities in Belarus aren't going to do anything about that. They have other problems that they need to deal with. So I think it's a business. All businesses want to scale and increase revenue, right? So what they do is they take this ransomware package that they have and they literally turn it into an IKEA type package. Okay, here's all the pieces, including here's the instructions, here's the wrench, and oh, by the way, here's a phone number you could call if you don't know, if you have a problem what you're doing, you can call a help desk, and then this will help them double their revenue or triple their revenue by deputizing script kiddies. If you've ever heard the term, that's a derisive term, a pejorative for a hacker that just uses somebody else's tools to kind of wreak havoc. Anybody ever hear that term, script kiddie? Jim, you must have, right? Script kiddie's an old term. If you call a real hacker a script kiddie, that's a good way to get punched. For 2021, top threat actor profiles. You might have seen some of these in the news, Lockbit, Avad, and Hive, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on them, but look over on the right here, TTPs, tools, techniques, and procedures, or tactics. Jim, what is this one? Tools, techniques, and procedures, right? In between being in IT and then being in the military, I know so many acronyms. Sometimes there's 3 different meanings for one acronym. You tend to forget stuff. But anyways, it's tools, techniques, and procedures. Initial access, execution, defense, evasion, impact. So think about a whodunit crime in a big city. Since we're in Chicago, this kind of stuff goes on here. And let's say you have a series of violent crimes and then the detectives are out investigating this stuff, right? So you go to the scene of the crime and we're going to look at, okay, how did the perp do reconnaissance? When they broke into the building, how did they break into the building? Once they broke into the building, what did they do when they got inside? What exactly did they do to the victim? What kind of weapon did they use? After they did that, what did they do to hide up to cover up their crimes and then get away with it? And this stuff all falls under forensics. And cyber forensics is a lot like this. So when cyber forensics people go in and they look at these breaches, we could kind of, by looking at these TTPs, we kind of get an idea who done it by looking at what kind of reconnaissance did they do? How did they get initial access? Once they got initial access, what kind of payload did they deploy? How did they move laterally through the system? So it's kind of a lot like a physical crime of somebody breaking into a building and then murdering a few people. The forensics are kind of similar. But by doing this, we start to get a very good idea. We start to get a very good idea of which one of these groups is responsible for whatever crime it is that we're dealing with. And we have handouts for this. We'll send out the PDFs after, but if you're interested, you could go to our cyber research unit and then you could learn about some of these different threat actors and where they are and who sponsors them and how they operate and all that. Ransomware as a service, I covered this already, but it's a production line of organized crime. Look over on the right here. Criminal help desks collect royalties for attackers by negotiating the ransom demand and providing the victim with assistance in purchasing bitcoins. The irony of this, Remember before I said that these operate like real businesses, right? They have interns, and they'll have a young kid, 22 years old, graduated from school. Okay, kiddo, you're on the help desk. Your job is to help the customers. The customers are the victims, and the customers call up and say, I can't decrypt my data. Can you help me? And they're like, oh yes, I'm more than happy to help you. And the reason for that is because they're trying to protect their business model. They know that they need to deliver what they say they're going to deliver, or people are going to stop paying the ransom. So they're actually pretty good. They're not perfect because they're still criminals, but there have been some very strange cases of them enthusiastically helping people get their data back. It's all very strange. Paying ransom rarely works. This statistic comes from Sophos. 65% of data is restored after paying the ransom. I think this number is low. That's my opinion. Other cybersecurity practitioners might disagree with that. And the reason I say that, I'd mentioned violent crime before, right? When it comes to statistics for, say violent crime or vehicular accidents and things like that, we have a very good idea what the numbers are because these things all get reported. Cyber crime, depending on the crime and where it happens, it's not always going to be reported. A lot of it goes unreported. So the truth is we have some general ideas what these numbers are, but we don't know exactly. We don't know exactly what they are. And you don't see it happening. If this hotel was under a ransomware attack, or we ate in that Italian restaurant at lunch, right? Let's say they were on a ransomware attack or something, we're not going to know about it, But if somebody gets murdered, or there's a massive accident on I-90, you're going to know about that. And somebody asked me the one day, said, well, in one of these presentations, well, how pervasive is this, really? And I said, honestly, I would say it's probably about as pervasive as graffiti. Imagine if you tried to have law enforcement clean up all the graffiti. That's how pervasive this problem is. It's just you really don't see it. It's going on constantly. It's nonstop. And if you own a building and it gets tagged with graffiti, the police aren't going to clean it up. You're going to have to go out there and sandblast it off yourself. That's kind of the boat that everybody's in right now. We're still kind of fighting an uphill battle with all this stuff.
There is no central agency that these can get reported to?
IC3.gov. You can report it to IC3.gov, and I would encourage you to do that because that helps us to get these numbers. The more people report this stuff, the better idea we have what the numbers are. But keep in mind that local law enforcement cannot help you with this. The state police typically are not going to help with this. The FBI is not usually going to help with it unless it's something like $400,000 or $500,000 and up, and it's somebody that has the favor of FBI. So law enforcement really is not in a position to help small to mid-sized businesses with this, and that's why I like the graffiti example, right? The police are not going to come clean up graffiti. We just don't have the resources for this. Now that said, if you do have a ransomware attack or the victim of a crime, you can report it to the local police. But me being a taxpayer and a citizen, to me I'm kind of like, is that the best use of their time? What I mean? When they have to respond to people that really need help. But I would encourage you to report it to IC3.gov because then we could start getting these statistics and we have a better idea what's going on.
IC3.gov is actually just a reporting agency. It's not something that they have dedicated technicians that can actually help you.
No. No, the government really doesn't have any resources to help the small to mid-sized business with that kind of stuff. And that's exactly why we're doing this, is because we need to front run these problems and then reduce the risk, the probability, and the impact of this happening before it does, because it's pretty much inevitable. Average approximate cost to organizations to rectify the impacts of the most recent ransomware attack. The stuff keeps going up. And this really kind of includes everything, because the first thing that's going to happen is you can't operate and you start hemorrhaging cash because you're losing revenue, right? And then the next thing that happens is you're going to call up your IT service provider or some forensics company that's going to come out and they're going to do triage on this. And when you call up somebody like me or somebody like Jim at 2 o'clock in the morning and you tell us, well, we need you to fly from your cornfield out to here, we're like, okay, great. But that kind of incident response is extremely expensive, $300, $400, $500, $700 an hour in order to have that kind of thing. So then you have all the cleanup, and then you have the forensics work, and then you restore the data. You could have impacts to business reputation. Look what happens to companies like Target and Equifax. Now when these breaches are announced, their stock drops instantly. So you could lose trust from the public. And then there's fines. You could incur all kinds of fines if they exfiltrate PII or PHI. Then if it's 100 or 10,000 records or whatever, you could get fined, and then there's lawsuits and there's all these other things. So there's just so many different layers to all this, or so many costs that it's really, this is, if you get a bad enough attack, this is just as bad as your building burning down or getting flooded. It's really that catastrophic. So it's something that, think we all have fire insurance. Everybody's fire insurance. Anybody in here make a fire insurance claim recently? Anybody in here make a fire insurance claim ever? Right? Does everybody in here have cybersecurity insurance? Now, if I ask that in a room full of people, not people, they don't want to admit that they don't, but think about this. We express risk as probability times impact, right? And you look at a building fire, the impact is obviously very, very high. That's bad. But the probability of a building fire, I would argue, is actually fairly low with modern building codes. My house is 260 years old. It's a little bit different if it ever catches on fire. It's going to poof. You're going to see that for miles. But my point is, so if a cybersecurity attack, a ransomware attack, and a building fire could both have equally catastrophic effects on your business, but I don't think the probability of a cybersecurity attack is low. I think it's medium to possibly high. So when you have something, if you have something that's low-high, maybe you mitigate it, maybe you don't. But if it's something that's medium and then high, this is something we need to mitigate in advance. Everyday challenges for small to mid-sized businesses. I spent a lot of years, in enterprise, big enterprise, and we had all the resources that we could possibly need for security because it was all taken out of your paychecks, right? Small businesses don't have the luxury of all this stuff. So, a good friend of mine that I grew up with, I've known him for 30 or 40 years, we were both tech guys, and then they started a brewery, and now he has 50 employees, which I think is hilarious, because I'm like, you failed math, and now you're doing payroll for 50 people. He said, hey, I'm running a $3 million business. Yeah, I know you are. But there's all these things, what they do to generate revenue is brew beer and then make food. But on top of that, there's 1,000,001 other things that they have to do. You have safety, you have OSHA, you have all these regulations, you have ADA, you have these food inspections. So just on top of what they're doing, their core competency, they love to brew beer, they have 1,000,000 other things to do. And I think literally every small business is like this. And a lot of them, whatever it is that they're doing is their passion, but there's still 1,000,000 other things on top of that they have to do. So, and now we're going to throw cybersecurity on top of this as well. And things like ADA and OSHA, those are mandatory, right? They're legally mandatory, imposed by federal law. But cybersecurity, depending on what you do, for example, my friend with the brewery, there's nobody that's going to impose cybersecurity on them. That has to be a choice for them to adopt that. So a lot of small businesses are in that boat. Now, some do have requirements because you're working in healthcare, or you're working in finance or something like that, or you have a contract with a Fortune 500 and they tell you have to do this. But for probably most small to mid-sized businesses, I would say that cybersecurity is kind of discretionary. They have to choose to adopt it. So you're already doing enough things. And this is why we get out and we do this education. It's not that I want to scare the crap out of people, but I want to help small to mid-sized business owners understand the risks to them so that they can make good decisions. Because I do not want your building being burned down or flooded, and I do not want you being the victim of a cybersecurity attack that could very well put you out of business. And we can prevent this in advance. Difficult to manage cybersecurity with competing priorities. Again, I kind of already touched base on that. Complexity of shifting to a remote workforce. This was already underway prior to COVID, and COVID really accelerated this. We've been talking about, who's familiar with the phrase zero trust environment? You ever heard that one? Yeah, you, me, and me. But we've been talking about zero trust. In the old security, and back in the 90s, security was you go to work and then there's a firewall and there's some level of automated patching and then you have some kind of cheap antivirus. And you're kind of inside the egg, and the egg has a hard outer shell and everything inside is soft. So zero trust basically is every single laptop, every single server is in its own egg, and none of the eggs trust the other eggs. You don't trust anything by default, because this is, that's my personal computer anyway, but you're in the airport, you're in a hotel, you're connected to your cell phone, you're at your friend's house or whatever, so you can't implicitly trust any network. And even if I take that to ConnectWise in Tampa and plug it into the network, it still doesn't trust it, even though it's a ConnectWise, if it's a ConnectWise asset. That's the direction that things are moving in, but it's created real challenges for the small to mid-sized businesses as well. Poor communications between organizations and their IT managed service providers. a lot of times cybersecurity with these businesses that are you already have 5 or 6 or 7 balls in the air as it is, right? And it's almost like, yeah, I'm going to start doing a better diet next week. And then next week, you're like, yeah, I'm going to get next week. And then cybersecurity is kind of the same way. You know, people, they tend to put it off until, you know, you go get an exam and the blood work's like, hey, you know, until you actually have an event. So, but we need to stop being reactive with this, and we need to start being proactive. You know, the best time to start a fitness routine was 10 years ago, but the next best time is today. Poor cybersecurity skill sets within the organization. It's exceedingly difficult to really well-qualified people that are further on in their career. Employing them costs about as much as employing a staff lawyer. So most small to mid-sized businesses aren't going to go out and hire a staff lawyer. And you know, mid-level techs, even mid-level techs with a couple of years experience and a bachelor's degree and some experience, they're you know, $120, $130, even if you're out in a cornfield somewhere. And by the time you add your labor burden and all that, they're just very, very expensive. So you need to rely on these partnerships with companies like Temple & Associates and ConnectWise, and then we bring you economies of scale and we provide you access to this kind of talent on a fractional basis and make it affordable. Ad hoc business continuity and disaster recovery efforts. Again, the best time to have a business continuity. Does everybody know what BCDR is, business continuity and disaster recovery? You know, one of my favorite examples of this, we have a partner that is in Kenosha. And I think we all remember what happened in Kenosha. You saw in the news, fire, right? And they were a block from that. And they had a functioning they had a BCDR in place for like 5 years as part of their SOC 2 Type 2. And what happened was they declared a disaster, and then they went to their BCDR and their disaster recovery plan, and they closed up shop, covered the windows with plywood, and then they dispersed their employees because they had all this stuff done already. And they'd been practicing it every single year. And even though it was a real pain in the butt for them and it was inconvenient, they had to work long hours, there was exactly 0 service interruptions to their customers. In spite of the fact that they were going through a disaster and Kenosha was burning to the ground where their business was, their customers had 0 impacts to actual service delivery, even though their techs had to work hard, and at the end of the disaster, they went back and then they went back to their shop. And the reason is because they had this stuff, they did it 10 years ago, not tomorrow. And again, think about, you know, what's going on in, you know, Vermont right now, or the tornado in Chicago just yesterday. You need to have a business continuity and disaster recovery plan in place for that. And oh, by the way, all this stuff is all part of business maturity, and small businesses are always going to be concerned with business valuation. So having policies and procedures and these things actually add to your business valuation. Increased cost to respond and recover from an incident. The cost of this stuff just keeps going up. This will be in the handouts if you want to go to our cyber research page and then geek out over the different threat actors. It's actually kind of interesting. They're all over the place: China, Russia, Eastern Europe. Some of them are actually our allies, you know, but that stuff doesn't make the news. We used to get briefings on that stuff when I worked in the classified realm. You'd find out that our own allies are breaking into our systems and taking stuff. France. We're only human. A person is involved at the center of most security incidents. So this statistic here says 82% of breaches result from human elements. And having done penetration testing, or what we call white hat hacking, which I've done, I would say that's probably about right. Because what we typically find is during the reconnaissance phase, we enumerate and we find everything that's connected to the internet: web servers, database servers, mail servers, whatever it is that's in their DMZ. And then we do attacks on that stuff, and usually we find that that's reasonably well hardened, but not always. Sometimes you can get through it. That's exactly what happened to Equifax. They had some kind of a database problem. Sometimes you can get through that stuff. So what happens, the next thing we do is we move on to tricking humans to making a poor decision, which benefits me as a hacker. And this could be making phone calls, it could be phishing, whaling. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. 66% of breaches involve phishing or stolen credentials. Stealing credentials is very, very easy to do. 2.9% of employees, I don't know why this says may, it should say will, actually. That's a pretty reliable number. If you spam a large organization, people are going to click on it. And sometimes people just make mistakes. Sometimes they just have a bad day. And all of us have done this. You know, I haven't been in a car accident, I think, I don't know, since I hit a deer maybe in like 2005 or something like that. And a couple of weeks ago or months ago, I was driving through Newark and I almost ran a red light and almost caused an accident. I'm human, I was tired. And sometimes people make mistakes and there's a bad outcome. So even people that are properly trained and then well-intentioned, they're going to make mistakes. They're humans. So this is going to continue to work. Now that said, what's the low-hanging fruit? We want to know what we could do to reduce this risk dramatically with as little spend and as little effort as soon as possible. And that's one of the things that having an assessment is going to help you find. Adopt email filters. Now an email filter, what this means, let's say that Alice is sending an email to Bob. I don't want the email going directly from Alice's domain to Bob's domain. I want it going to a warehouse in the middle, an email scanning service, and there's a whole bunch of these that are available. And that's all that they do. It's their core competency. And by the way, Temple is going to have multiple options for this. Everybody needs to have email filtering in place because that way, even before it ever gets to your inbox, if it's spam or it has a malicious payload or if it comes from known threat actors or any of these other things, then it's going to quarantine that email and then delete it. And then the second thing here is provide user training to combat phishing attacks. Great bang for the buck, both of these things. And there's so many companies that are offering this now. This is a great thing about free markets, right? There's so many different companies that are offering these services now that it's really driven the prices down. And it's become very, very affordable, both of these things, email filters and phishing. The second thing is going to be practice good password hygiene. And I could spend an entire half an hour on that and talking about the academic angles of how a hash algorithm works and all this other stuff. We all know this. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you to brush your teeth and wash your hands. But I like passphrases. I like very long passphrases, and then I'll make up ridiculous things. You don't want to use song titles or lyrics or things from movies. Just as an experiment, the one day I took the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, and then something like 10 other common phrases, things out of movies. And then I ran them through an MD5 hash. Probably 2 people here know what that is. And then I went to Have I Been Pwned? And boom, all of them. They're all those have already been pre-cracked. So any of those things, if you use them as a password, those could be brute force pretty much instantaneously. So my best guidance on this is to make up a ridiculous phrase that nobody has ever repeated or nobody has, I say, a phrase that no one has ever said or ever will say. And if you want help with that, go find your friendly neighborhood 10-year-old and tell them to make up some ridiculous phrases. I had my kids do this. And then I got this long list of things that were like pumpkin poop pie with flies and stuff like that. That's not in a rainbow table. It's not in a song lyric. It's not anywhere. Nobody's ever said that. But on the other hand, it's easy to remember and it's finger friendly and it's easy to type. And using current technology, it's going to be next to impossible to crack. I could go on and on about that. And the last piece here is going to be use multi-factor authentication everywhere. I had mentioned before that stealing usernames and passwords is easy to do. We could do it through technical means, social engineering. So multi-factor authentication is going to be the first and best layer of defense against this. We need to have multi-factor authentication really anywhere that is operationally feasible. And again, multi-factor authentication, there's so many different ways to do it now, and a lot of them are free, right? Everybody does MFA at some level, whether it's via text or Google Auth or the Microsoft Authenticator, but there's also a bunch of paid options out there, and there's so many of them that it's driven the cost down, way down. And again, get with Temple, and they can provide you with a bunch of different options for all of these things that's going to fit your budget and then align with your operations. Most data thieves are organized professional criminals deliberately trying to steal information that can turn into financial gain. I get ahead of myself with my slides. I already covered this. But like I said, they look, smell, act, and taste like real businesses. They have real engineers, real project managers, and then they're going to have a spread of people that are anywhere from interns that are young up to some people that are middle age and that kind of stuff. This second bullet here, 40% of ransomware incidents involve desktop sharing software, RDP. And having done penetration testing and vulnerability management, seeing RDP exposed to the internet, boy, I could just go to the bad neighborhood in Chicago and then leave my doors unlocked and then leave my laptop on the seat. You know what's going to happen. RDP is dangerous. I do not like to see it exposed to the internet. Now that said, sometimes you find that businesses are doing something that is not necessarily safe from a security perspective, but it's operationally necessary, and they don't have an operational workaround, and so there is a use case for it. So I have seen use cases for having remote desktop protocol exposed to the internet, but if you do that, then we need to have compensating and mitigating controls in place, or ways we can protect it. But the first thing to do is identify that. And RDP is when you, what's the command in Windows for that? I can't remember. MSTSC, is that what that is? Where you go in the command line, MSTSC-V, and then you type in the IP address, and then boom, it shows you the remote system. And then you put in your username and your password. I can't believe I remembered that command. I've put that in many years. And then, okay, I'm into a remote system. It's convenient, I'll give you that, but exposing that to the internet is extremely dangerous. It drives me crazy when we see that. The last time I found RDP exposed to the internet, we ran a brute force attack on it for 2 months straight, and they didn't even know. We tried to log into it, I think, 5 million times or something like that, and they didn't even notice that we were doing it. 62% of system intrusion incidents involved threat actors compromising business partners. This is exactly what happened with Target, by the way. Somebody, HVAC contractor, went into a Target store. I think it was a store, it might have been a data center or something like that. Laptop was infected, they plugged into the network, and then they got a toehold and then moved laterally through the rest of the system. And when it comes to the big targets, what we find is, let's say you're a Fortune 100 company or a Fortune 500 company, or you work in defense. I did a lot of work for defense industrial-based companies. The threat actors are not going to attack Lockheed Martin or Nabisco or anything like that. But if you could go out and then, pull contracts that are publicly available through FBO.gov or something like that, Federal Biz Ops, federalbizopportunities.gov, the contracts are public, and you could see who's the prime and then who's the subs, right? Say, okay, well, the prime is Sierra Nevada Corporation, and then 6, 7 layers down, well, the heck, there's a little machine shop in Taneytown, Maryland that is making sub-assembly for aircraft racks or something like that. Well, let's attack that. That's exactly what they do. And you get into that system, and then you watch the email traffic for months and months, and that gives you a way to map out and then move up. So that's a common tactic. They will move down the chain and then break in that way. A couple of other considerations. Study the NIST cybersecurity framework, NIST, National Institute for Standards and Technology. The cybersecurity framework, pretty much everything that ConnectWise does, and the education and the tools that we're doing that are available through our partners, is based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. And it's a framework, it's something that is going to standardize cybersecurity across a wide swath of businesses. And to kind of put that in perspective, think about the National Electric Code. That's a standard, right? So literally every commercial building you go into, every residence you go into, the electrical systems are all the same. They're all done exactly the same, in compliance with the National Electric Code framework. And the NEC is, that was NFPA 70, National Fire Protection Act. So that's a safety thing. This is cybersecurity, so that's designed to protect you. And the cybersecurity framework is to help you reduce your cybersecurity risk. Create and practice an incident response plan. That's part of your policies and procedures. If you don't have an incident response plan today, reach out to Temple & Associates, and I have one that I could give you. It's a 7-pager. I got it from the Defense Security Service a couple of years ago. It was originally written for classified systems, but I stripped the classified stuff out. It's a public domain document, but every single person I've ever given that to has emailed back and said, thanks, this is great. And it doesn't mean that you could just take it and then put it in your system security plan and forget it. You still have to tweak the thing. But I have a good free one that I can give you. Keep your software up to date. This is critically important. I don't know how many times do we get up and then the Log4j, oh my goodness, the whole world is on fire, right? Or some new RDP plot. This is what makes our career field, I think, different than, say, for example, the legal career field or finance. Or the medical career field. Let's say that you're a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. You could look at bills sitting in committee, new research that's coming, and you kind of have an idea what's going to roll down the hill that you're going to have to deal with. But not us. We get up one day, you're like, oh, vacation's canceled. We have 10,000 infected systems and we have to fix all of them. Or you have stuff that's broken and it doesn't work, so there's like these magic fires that pop up out of nowhere. At least a hurricane or a tornado, you get some kind of warning. You just get up one day and everything's on fire. It's the nature of our career field. Keep your software up to date. Review sizes. What does that acronym stand for? I keep forgetting it. So, like I said, I want to say it's not Cybersecurity Information Systems Agency. I keep confusing it with DISA. Like I said, I know so many acronyms, I just can't even keep them all straight anymore. Review ConnectWise's security, trust, and compliance site. So if you have any questions about what ConnectWise is doing to protect our house, and as an extension, the houses of our partners, and you could look at our security and our trust and compliance site, and there's some more information there. So I worked at Camp David for a bunch of years. In the middle of my presentations, I like to take a right turn a little bit because all this technical stuff gets kind of boring. This is what we call a Roadrunner. It's a mobile skiff, secure compartment and information facility. And this thing follows around what we call the Beast, right? The Beast is a presidential limo. And then this communicates with the limo, and it communicates back with satellites and all this other stuff. And back in the 80s, that thing was a van. This is David Eisenhower, Camp David. Camp David was originally called Shangri-La. And the way that Camp David came to be was during World War II, Roosevelt obviously had his health problems. And then secondly, they were concerned about German U-boats in the Potomac. Roosevelt there was a presidential yacht in those days that had a small staff of Navy sailors that would go out on the yacht, and they decommissioned the yacht, and they were sending Roosevelt up to, this was in the days before everything had air conditioning, and they wanted to get him out of the heat, and they wanted him to go somewhere secure. So they started sending him up into the Catoctin Woods. I spent 10 years up there, 11 years, and he named it Shangri-La. And it was called Shangri-La. Incidentally, I've sat on the porch and in the chairs where Roosevelt and Churchill planned the D-Day invasion. You know, some of that stuff happened up there. It's amazing. There's some real history that happened up there. But President Eisenhower renamed Shangri-La after his grandson, Camp David, and that's what it's called today. So I'll go back to a quick story about the Roadrunner. Working in that type of environment, you tend to get a lot of inside information about people, and you hear stories, and a lot of them are good and some of them aren't good, but I'm not going to share stories that aren't good. I'm going to share stories that are funny. Pretty much everybody, politics aside, kind of liked Ronald Reagan because he's a funny guy, he's affable and all that. And he had a reputation for being extremely friendly. And what I was told by people said, if you're going to do something in the president's cabin, don't look him in the eye because he'll shake your hand and he's feeding you cookies, and Nancy's cookies are terrible and all this other stuff. Really, really nice guy. And he was also a bit of a prankster. So this Roadrunner, this goes everywhere the president goes, everywhere. He goes, the Beast and the Roadrunner goes. I stick it in a C-17, including his ranch out in California. So, and this thing is going to be staffed by a couple of Army troops, right? You have an E5 and E6 sitting in there. It's an operations center, so this is probably a 12-on, 12-off detail. So this is your job. You're an Army E5, and you get to sit in this truck for 12 hours, just waiting for something to maybe happen. So you get kind of bored. But anyways, Reagan is out walking around on the ranch, and then he sees the Roadrunner, and then the guy in the passenger seat, or the guy in the driver's seat is sitting there reading the newspaper, and then the guy that's in the passenger seat is there sleeping. Hurry up and wait. That's what we do in the military. You fall asleep. So Reagan walks up to the side of the truck, and then he says to the driver, "Go shh," and he opens the door and he says to him, "Get out." And he tells, "Let's go over here." And then Reagan gets in the truck and then closes the door quietly, and then this E5 is sitting next to him sleeping, and he looks at him. He lays on the horn. And this kid wakes up and he looks at him and says, "Where to?" And I've heard a couple of stories of him and some of the other presidents pranking people. I have some good ones. I could tell you some more of them over drinks after. So what's a SEAM? We're going to get into this briefly. How am I doing on time? I talk a lot. Are we okay on time? Okay. Security information and event monitoring. A SEAM works by collecting log and event data generated by an organization's system. So you have all these systems on your network, on your information system, and they operate 24/7, 365. And you're going to have servers, routers, switches, intrusion detection, laptops. You're going to have things in the cloud. You could have ERP, you could have VoIP. There's a million. All these things are creating log files. And until fairly recently, there was no options in the small to mid-sized business space to deal with all these logs, to distill them down so we know what they mean. And these could be thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of logs per day. And until fairly recently in the small to mid-sized business space, these things just fell through the cracks and then didn't get monitored. We had technology to do this in the enterprise 15, 20 years ago, but it was insanely expensive, things like Splunk. Why do we need to look at the logs? Why are these logs interesting? Well, they tell us things that we might not know otherwise, but auditing and compliance requirements. Does anybody here have any kind of compliance requirements, whether it's CMMC or FFIEC or some kind of contractual compliance requirements, anything like that? Insurance companies will sometimes mandate SIEM. Full visibility of everything happening with the network. Detailed forensics analysis in the event of major security breaches. Remember my example about the violent crime in a city before, right? They go in and they clean up, don't they? They're going to wipe the fingerprints, clean up the blood or whatever, hide the body. Cybersecurity threat actors do exactly the same thing. But a SIEM takes the logs and then offloads them into the cloud where they can't get them. So when we finally figure out that there's been some type of an event, and with a SIEM it should happen a lot quicker anyway, we could go and pull those logs, even if the threat actor deleted them, which they love to do, or they'll just delete the ones that point to them, and then we can analyze them and we can figure out who done it. What was the reconnaissance, what was the payload. And then this third bullet here, this is really important, dramatically decreases the time to identify threats. We have a phrase in our line of work that we call dwell time. And dwell time is the time between when bad guy gets a toehold in your system and creates what we call persistent access. They've gotten into something, and the amount of time that it takes us to discover something that's going on. And in most of the time, we don't find out until they do something that alerts us to our presence. They make some type of ransomware demand, or they're doing an exfiltration. Without any kind of protective technology, only the old security model where you just have firewall, automated patching, and then antivirus, dwell time is about 6 months. It could be as long as 180 days. And by the time they've been in there for 180 days, that's like having water in your basement for 180 days. It's going to be filled with mold. It's a mess. But with SIEM and EDR and SOC in place, we could get this down to less, in some cases, minutes or hours or days. And that response time is just incredibly critical. Here's the problem with SIEM. Engineers, that's Jim and I, and Andrew, right? We're like, well, SIEM is a critical detective and protective technology. It's great. We've got to have it. But then the decision maker is the president or the CFO or somebody that has to sign a contract. I don't know what this does. And then you try to explain it to them like, I don't understand this, So the problem is a SIEM is kind of an abstract concept. And I have a whole other presentation that's a half an hour long where I use a series of analogies that kind of explains what SIEM does. And if need be, we could do that along with any of your customers, or I could give you the slides and walk you through them. And then the users, stop cooking fish in a microwave. They don't care. SIEM doesn't do anything for the users. It doesn't make their computer faster. It doesn't make it slower. It doesn't give you any kind of special mouse cursor. It doesn't do anything. They just do not care. So it's kind of hard to convince people to adopt SIEM. How SIEM works, this is concept. So SIEM will collect logs from web applications, from sensors that we could put on your network devices, workstations and servers, cloud integration. And then it feeds all these logs into the SOC where they're all monitored. And I would kind of compare this to, any vets here? Are there any vets besides me? Anybody know what an AWAC plane is? Remember those things? Plane with the disc on top and the stripe, right? 707 or 737. It's flying over the battlefield and it's looking at, troops, tanks, ships, missiles, ground traffic, whatever's going on. And then it's going to feed all that to battlefield commanders. Now, if the AWAC plane just sees some tanks moving around, okay, that's no big deal. We see some troops moving. Okay, well, let's see. We see tanks and troops and missiles. Ooh, now we've got a problem. So it's going to fuse that data together and it's going to notify a human, a battlefield commander in that case, you need to do something. That's not something that humans could detect without the help of technology and automation. Differences in SIEM and EDR and MDR. So now I'm going to talk a little bit. Did somebody have a question? EDR and MDR. EDR is endpoint detection and response, and then MDR, managed detection and response. Now, EDR is pretty much next generation antivirus, intelligent antivirus. SIEM is really, it's more of it's a detective control, kind of like a fire extinguisher, or not a fire extinguisher, a smoke alarm. A smoke alarm can tell you that something's going on, but it's not going to do anything about it. EDR is more like one of these things. SIEM and EDR could both pick it up, but EDR and MDR could actually put the fire out in real time. So EDR is basically, I'm going to expound on this a little bit, but EDR and MDR are next generation advanced antivirus. Traditional antivirus is signature based and only recognizes threats that are known. So in the older antivirus, you would have some piece of malicious logic, the Melissa virus, or I love you. Remember that one? You get the email all caps, I love you, right? So when the I love you virus first goes out and affects everything because it had never been seen before. Once the I love you virus is known and it's in the wild, you study it and then you take a hash of it, you put it into a database, so next time you see it, it could quarantine it. So it's a simple pattern matching technology, and that's all that it really does, is it could match malicious logic that it's already seen before. Now EDR does this, but it also has components of, it has pattern matching, pattern recognition, it does code analysis, it's behavior based. So it's going to look at not only the payload, but it's actually going to look at the code and then what exactly this piece of malicious logic is doing. So EDR can actually, real-time file analysis, active code analysis, remediation. It has an undo feature built into it, literally an undo feature. We've all deleted a column in Excel or an entire paragraph in Word, right? Remember 10, 15 years ago, you're constantly hitting Control S, Control S, Control S, right? You don't have to do that anymore. If you delete a paragraph in Word, you click the undo button, boof, it comes back. EDR can do this. So if you get a piece of malicious logic and you click on it and it starts executing it, EDR will look at what this thing is doing, and if it's doing something malicious, let's say it starts fooling with the registry, it's changing permissions, it's spawning PowerShell, it's connecting to remote systems, A, it's going to crush it, and then B, it could actually undo the changes in real time that it actually does. It could put out a fire in real time.
It can undo the changes that the malicious software was doing.
That's correct, yes. This is so sophisticated. Remember WannaCry? That was a nasty critter. That was based on a piece of Eternal Blue, I think that was called. I think it was called Eternal Blue. That was a piece of weapons-grade malicious logic that was developed by the NSA. And it got leaked somehow. It was called Eternal Blue. It was a zero-day exploit. The NSA was the only one that had it. They didn't tell anybody that they had it, and it got leaked. And then North Korea got a hold of this thing, and then they wrapped it in a worm. And a worm is something that could propagate from system to system without human interaction. That's different than a virus. And then on top of that, they attached a ransomware function to it just to add some extra fun to it. But they executed that. But they could have made billions of dollars if it was done correctly, but they screwed it up. They're not very good capitalists, I guess. But in any case, systems that had Sentinel-1 on them at that time, which is EDR, and Sentinel-1 is available through your MSP, it crushed that day one without ever having seen it before. So this was a piece of malicious logic developed by the NSA, weapons grade, and the machines that had Sentinel-1 on it. Now machines that had traditional AV, that thing rolled right over them because the NSA built it, right? But machines that had Sentinel-1, they saw what it was doing and they crushed it day one, even though it had never been seen before, not once. That's how good this stuff is. And it is more money than antivirus, but it's not so much more that it's unaffordable. So with that, we'll talk about the difference between EDR and MDR a little bit. EDR is largely automated, and it will notify humans when necessary. So what we like to see is, I don't like to see antivirus, traditional antivirus, in anything anymore that just has an operating system, whether it's Mac OS or Linux or Windows or Solaris or whatever it is. It should have some type of an EDR on it. But then when we do our crown jewels analysis, when Temple comes in and then does an assessment for you, we're going to determine what are the things where we have zero risk for tolerance for failure. What is it that we're going to put in the highest room in the tallest tower? We can't have it fail. We want to put MDR in those things, and MDR is managed detection and response. So EDR is mostly automated, but MDR is kind of like NORAD. NORAD, you have humans watching the radar and the screens, and when they see a threat that's coming in, at some point they might see something. Well, this is something where a human needs to take an action. So MDR is EDR plus humans, and our SOC has 160 full-time employees. It's 24/7, 365. It's a follow-the-sun model. It's global, and this is available to all of you at what is frankly a pretty palatable cost. So we want to see EDR in pretty much everything, and then MDR in the things that are really, really important. If you're in manufacturing, for example, maybe ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning. These are the computers that run your factory lines, and if your factory lines are down, you're hemorrhaging cash. So you would definitely want MDR on those kinds of things. I have a slide here on our cyber research unit. And why I think this matters is that ConnectWise, we have 17,000 partners globally, and we serve hundreds of thousands of their clients. And we serve primarily, we specialize in the small to mid-sized business, right? And that's why I'm here in this very, we only have a handful of people, we're small businesses. We have some enterprise clients, but we have, customers ultimately that might be 2 people or 20 people or 200 people, and there's some that are bigger than that. So I think that ConnectWise probably knows more about the threats that are facing the small to mid-sized business than probably Apple or Microsoft or Cisco or Cylance, because that's primarily who we serve. And we have hundreds of thousands of endpoints with EDR on them that are sending threat intelligence into our CRU so that we can protect the small to mid-sized business. And ConnectWise is on its way to becoming, I think, probably a household name in cybersecurity at some point. So, with all that scary stuff out of the way, what are we going to do? We need to protect ourselves. So we're going to talk about security and risk assessments. You don't know what you don't know, right? You're not cybersecurity experts. Your core competency is some other thing. Does anybody see anything wrong here? Any electricians here? Anybody? Any homeowners inspection? Know anything about that? That's my house, by the way. When I bought it, it was covered with this crappy asbestos. This is wrong. So when these wires here get wet, rain gets on them, water can run down into the weatherhead and then short this out. This one here is right. When these wires get wet, the water runs down and then it drips off and it can't get up into the weatherhead. And the reason I point this out is because it's just an oddball little thing that probably nobody in here knew, right? But when I have a homeowner's inspection, he comes in and he points this out, I'm like, huh, right? I didn't know that. So when you bring Temple in and they do an assessment for you, that's kind of what this experience is going to be like. You have an expert that's going through your systems, your policies and procedures, your processes, and they're going to point out the things that are not right. And then you're going to be reading, and they're like, well, I didn't know that. You know what I mean? But that's what experts are for. Components of a well-designed cybersecurity solution for your business. In a perfect world, we would have all these things: MFA, encryption, firewalls, cyber insurance, backups, dark web research, SIEM log management. But it all starts with a security assessment, because we don't know what we don't know, right? Confucius said that the journey of a million miles begins with the first step, right? My grandfather was a builder, and he said that, well, you have to get up on the roof and pound the first nail in the roof. I don't know if my grandfather ever read Confucius, but he was a wise man, and he was right about that. So the first thing we need to do is have a security assessment, so we could understand where our risks are, and then what we could do today and tomorrow to start bringing that risk down in kind of a very dramatic way. So we're going to, we love our analogies. So a house, I don't like animated slides. Let's click through these. So let's say we're going to do a security assessment on our house. First thing we're going to talk about, what's our crown jewels, right? What do we want to protect? We want to protect our family and our pets, collectibles, grandpa's watch, grandma's ring, documents and valuables, passports, birth certificates, electronics, and computers. But these stupid things, $1,400, right? My house catches on fire. I'm getting the kids, the dog, grabbing the laptop, and then maybe the documents are going to get out of Dodge, right? So once we identify everything, then we need to talk about, well, how are we going to protect it? We need doors and windows, locks, education, yard signs. Yard signs, incidentally, that's what we call a deterrent control. It doesn't detect anything, but it could possibly deter somebody. Let's say the two houses look completely equal, right? There's no car in the driveway, there's no lights on, they look inviting, they're nice neighborhoods, and one has a sign and one doesn't. You probably go, I think I'm going to pick the one that doesn't have a sign. And it's just one more thing in your defense in depth that is useful. So there's deterrent controls that we can use in cybersecurity as well. After this, we need to detect. So we might have alarms, motion sensors, doorbell cameras, neighborhood watch. And then we need, you have an incident, you have a break-in, you need to respond. Dog is a good way to respond. And a dog, incidentally, like cybersecurity, a dog does a couple different things, doesn't it? A dog will protect and detect, won't it? And respond. It'll do all those things. And in cybersecurity, we have some technology. Some technology will do just this and just this and just this. But there is technology that does protect, detect, and respond. And then there's the last piece here is recover. But in this case, we're talking about cybersecurity, actually, post-incident. Cybersecurity incident response plan, which I want to give you a free one. Backup systems, insurance, emergency equipment. And you may remember earlier, I was talking about the NIST cybersecurity framework. These are the 5 families in the NIST cybersecurity framework: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. These are the 5 families. And then under each of these 5 families, there are, or these are the 5 functions, and there's 23 families, and then there's 108 controls. And all the guidance for the 108 controls is in NIST 800-53, which is about 500 pages. So if you're the sort of person that likes to sit there and read regulations and laws, then maybe cybersecurity is for you. But my point is, again, we're not making what we're doing, we're not making this up, and the things that we're teaching our partners and building our systems, it's all based on the NIST cybersecurity framework. I think that I think in 10 or 15 years that the NIST cybersecurity framework is going to be like the National Electric Code. I think it's going to be ubiquitous because what we're starting to see is that the federal government is imposing it on their contractors, and the federal government's a giant employer. And then the states will look at it and say, well, that's a pretty good idea. We're going to impose it on our contractors, and then the businesses will, they will pick it up. But it goes a long, long way towards protecting you. So this is the right cybersecurity. So a few words on cyber insurance. One of these things is not like the others. And the reason I say that is you've all bought insurance probably dozens of times, right? Homeowners insurance, health insurance, life insurance, car insurance, whatever. We're so used to it, right? You get your car insurance, any kind of insurance, and you're like, no, I don't smoke. The roof is 25 years old. The car has ABS and it has, theft recovery. And then you kind of go check, 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 check. And then you send off your questionnaire to the Lizard or Flow or whatever, and you get a quote, and you just click it, and then you buy it. We're used to it. We're acclimated to it. Cybersecurity insurance is not like this. Insurance has been around forever. I think Lloyd's of London, it insured the East India Trading Company, I think, didn't they, right? So insurance companies, when it comes to things like natural disasters, driving, medical insurance, they have decades or centuries of all this actuarial data, and they're very, very good at gauging risk. So you could give them a very limited amount of information, and then they could write you an insurance policy based on that information, and then if something bad happens, you crash your car, they're going to pay for it. Cybersecurity insurance isn't like this. This is a new offering, and the insurance companies kind of fumbled into this business space, and the underwriters didn't know what to do. The insurance companies didn't know what to do. So 5 years ago, you got this 10-word question, this 10-check questionnaire, and they would give you cyber insurance for nominal costs. And guess what happened? They started hemorrhaging cash. They were losing their butts. So then they started hiking the prices up, and then they started to refine the questionnaires. And what's happening is they're sending out these questionnaires, and then you get this cybersecurity insurance questionnaire, and you think to yourself, okay, more insurance. Okay, I'm buying it off Flow or the Lizard. No, you're not. This is a different thing. Hey, SIEM. What's SIEM? Bob, do we have SIEM? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we have SIEM. Multi-factor authentication. Yeah, we have that on the workstations, right? So you check this, and then you get the insurance company. Oh, now I have a big, warm, fuzzy blanket. And then what was happening is companies were making claims, and then the insurance companies come out, and then they actually investigate, and they said, show me your SIEM, show me this. And you're like, oh, well, you're not doing what you said they were doing. And then they're denying the claims, and there's all this litigation. And right now, price discovery with that is still happening. The prices have gone up, they've come down a little bit, but the premiums have gone up a lot. But my key point here is when you buy cybersecurity insurance, which is something I definitely recommend. Remember what I mentioned before with fire insurance. You all have fire insurance. It was the last time you had a fire. So when you get cybersecurity insurance, when you get these questionnaires, read the entire thing. Read the entire thing. Make sure you understand exactly what it's asking for. And if there's anything on there that you don't understand perfectly, call Temple IT and then ask them to explain this to you. Because what will happen is you get this policy, and if you don't fill this thing out completely accurately, and then you have an incident, they're not going to pay, so now you're paying this insurance for nothing. And the funny thing is, every single one of us, if we leave here and go deliberately crash our car into a tree on the way home, insurance is going to cover it. I just tell them, oh, a deer ran out in front of me and I hit a tree, and they're like, okay, and they write you a check. Cyber insurance isn't like that because it's fairly new and they're still pretty risk adverse. So caveat emptor. Pump the brakes. It's not like other forms of insurance. Read the policy. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. It's not a security blanket. By the way, I have a funny shtick where I dress up like this guy, and his name's not Mayhem, his name's Bedlam, and he's like, I'm a phishing email, no matter what you do. It's a kind of a little marketing thing. Did I show you that, Jim? Yeah, I got to get that done. It was pretty funny. The good insurance carriers are starting to, they're getting better. More pricing stability long term. Like I said, price discovery is still happening in that. It's a new business space. It's fairly tumultuous, but it's getting a little bit better. Bad supply side issues. There's a lot of companies that have gotten out of it because they're lost their shirts doing this. Does Temple have do you have a cybersecurity insurance provider that you like to work with or you recommend that your clients work with? Do you have a preferred?
Yeah.
What's that?
Hub International.
So work with Temple on this, and there's others that are available. Yeah, one resource that I like, I was teaching classes for the American Bar Association for lawyers, for CPs for a couple of years. And the American Bar Association has a list of cyber insurance carriers that they recommend for law firms. And I looked at that and I'm like, this is a pretty good list. So you can take a look at that. So not enough access to insurance. The ugly, claims are more frequent and more severe. That's true. Cause pricing to go up market-wide. So the prices on this stuff is still going up. Side-by-side comparison, applicant A and applicant B. So this company had no endpoint protection, no training. They had open RDP ports. So 2021, their premium was $12,000, or it was declined. Some of them just said, no, we're not going to insure you. Or in this other case, it was $22,000. Applicant B, they had endpoint protection and training, closed their RDP ports. Their insurance is $8,000. And the increase is $14,000 in 2022. So the point is it's not going to be cheap no matter what you do. But by deploying this technology, you could cut the premiums, kind of like in half. And if you're not doing these things, you call them up and say, "Will you insure me?" And they're like, "Nope, I'm not going to insure you. You're uninsurable." Things to watch in cyber insurance: limit and coverage cuts. Again, read this stuff carefully. With car insurance, we're so used to it. Oh, 10/30, 100/300, tort, rah, rah, rah. Let's send my insurance out and then get it. But cyber insurance just isn't like that. Read everything and look exactly what it covers. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to talk to your legal counsel about it and consult with Temple IT on that. Ransomware isn't going anytime soon. I think I kind of explained that, pretty clearly why that's happening, and the underlying geopolitical circumstances are not going to change overnight. So we're in defensive mode, and we have to protect ourselves. And then there's a lot of regulatory changes. California's put out some laws based on what the EU is doing. In the United States, there's not any authority in the Constitution for the federal government to really impose regulations on small to mid-sized businesses. But the states can, and then in some cases, depending on what vertical you're in, if you're in finance or something like that, your customers, your clients may tell you that you have to comply. But based on whatever state you're in, whatever jurisdiction you're in, and who your customers are and what your verticals are, keep an eye on regulatory changes that may impact you. And now we're going to go back to Andrew. Back to you, Andrew.
That the IT company doesn't share your liability if there is an incident.
It depends.
Yeah.
If there was negligence involved, then maybe. But
Yeah.
if they did everything they're supposed to do, it only probably, and I'm not a lawyer.
There could be a letter of attestation, or it really depends on what's in the contracts.
It just depends, yeah. The answer is maybe.
Yeah. Per case-by-case basis.
And what I do is a lot like what a lawyer does. You could ask a lawyer, well, what happens in such a case? And they say, well, it depends. You've got to read exactly what the law says and then see how it applies to a certain case. And cybersecurity is a lot like that. A lot of people say, well, it depends on circumstances.
Precisely. So Jason has covered most of this stuff, so I'm going to run through this very quickly. Who here feels more terrified than they did before they walked in this room? Okay. So,
I just want to become a cyber criminal at this point.
yeah, I mean, it's a lucrative business. It is a very lucrative business. So the main thing we're promoting today is assessments, control assessments, vulnerability assessments, architecture assessments. Taking a look at what you have today and where you need to get to fill the gaps and identify any specific needs. So control assessments. Let's say you're still running Symantec antivirus. Used to be good, right? Used to be valuable. Now not so much. So replacing a control like that with something like SentinelOne or EDR is where we're going to identify those areas of improvement.
Let me throw out I love my anecdote. Let me throw out a quick anecdote on how advanced. Old school antivirus would be like if you had a car that just had just had crumple zones and seatbelts. And I have a car like that. It's 40 years old. But EDR, you could go out now and buy a cheap Chevy or a Kia or something like that, and they have collision, lane departure warning, ABS, traction assist, traction control, lane departure warning. If a kid runs out in front of the car, it'll stop itself. It's unbelievable. And EDR is really that much more advanced than antivirus. They're just not in the same league at all.
Absolutely. So
SentinelOne and EDR, or is it an
it is. It is an EDR. And through ConnectWise, it's actually an MDR because their SOC team manages and monitors the logs that are generated.
We have NORAD watching it. Our
Yes.
MDR customers are being watched by our NORAD 24/7, 365.
Yes. So moving on, policy development. This is probably the most boring part of this whole thing, but having clear, defined policies will help structure how you deploy security within your organization. One thing to keep in mind, you may have policies that were generated 10, 15 years ago. They may no longer be applicable with what we need for today's threats. So if that's something you guys need help with, please reach out. Something that we'd be happy to help review with you. Security awareness training, this is one of my favorites. Teach a man to fish. You need to train your staff to be aware of the phishing emails, the USB stick that was left in the parking lot, the sketchy UPS guy who's going into your server room, things of that nature. How to exactly. So identifying those and stopping those threats before they become a bigger problem is a great first line of defense, and it's very easy to accomplish. Active Directory improvement, so identity management protection. This is one of those things that's low-hanging fruit. Usually you can implement something like MFA or secure password policies very quickly, and it will effectively increase your security posture exponentially. Tool identification and deployment. Now, so once you've gone through kind of this whole first part, right, we run the assessments, we have the policies in place, now we need to identify the proper tools to protect your environment. So we'll go through DNS protection, firewall, antivirus, all of these different layers work together, and really it coincides with the security operations and the SIEM. Everything is consolidated by the SIEM, and then you have your security operations team reviewing everything that goes into the SIEM. Then, let's say, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and there's crazy activity going on within the SIEM. That's where this alert escalation happens, and I get a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning and they say, hey, something bad is happening, somebody needs to take a look. That's really what ties all of this together, and cybersecurity is really a circle. It starts and ends with assessments. We start with an assessment, we identify what we think we need to do, we put all of this in place, and at the end, you need to assess again. So we always recommend bringing in a third-party company to do actual penetration testing. And they'll go and they will act as an adversary and try to get into your network or see what they can get to once they are within your network. So if that's something that you've never done or something that you're interested in, please reach out to us. That's something we'd be happy to help schedule with you guys and make sure that everything that we have put in place, we didn't miss something. It's very easy to miss a control like your little wire hanging off the side of your building that's going to light your house on fire.
It definitely is, yeah. Yep.
And the last couple of things, patch management.
The house is covered with asbestos.
Well,
fire insurance?
fire insurance, exactly. And then patch management, tool management, this is kind of the full circle approach, stuff, general housekeeping that needs to be scheduled and will be defined in your policies. So that's kind of holistically what we're looking at.
Quick question, the
yeah.
backup and recovery.
Of
So
course.
are we talking about a different system that has a backup, like say a cloud, which would then recover if your EDR detects something and your MDR is putting it out, but we want to recover something that's lost?
So yeah, so
The undo button didn't do it, then I would go to the cloud.
exactly. So 3, 2, 1, you have 3 copies of your backups on 2 different types of media, one of them being in a completely different building than your primary location. That allows if a tornado or a fire comes through and burns your entire data center down, well, you have somewhere else in the cloud to go recover to. So, what are we going to do next? You are going to schedule a call with me. My email is up there. My business cards are on the table. We are offering some hefty discounts for security assessments if you register within the next 10 days. So I'm hoping to see all of your emails in my inbox come.
I cannot implore you enough how important this is to get done.
Exactly.
It's like turning 50. You gotta go to the doctor, and well, you know what happens when you're 50. You go to the doctor, but you need to know. You know.
Precisely. I mean, yes. This is. I always say this isn't optional anymore. This is something that's mandatory, and we cannot stress enough. Get the assessment done. Questions? Anybody else have any other questions?
So your slide that says the CFO is the one who's like, why do we need this?
Yeah. Are you the CFO?
I'm the CFO. I'm the one begging for it. It was the partners that were like, why do we need this? Until we had an incident.
Yeah.
Then I got everything I wanted.
Imagine that.
The CFOs do deal with risk. What kind of company are the CFO of?
Private equity.
Sure, you're going to be very concerned with risk.
We're moving
Absolutely.
money all over the place all the time. And yeah, and we had somebody click on me.
Oh,
Business email. You're going to be a target for business email compromise. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, so you need all this stuff because a lot of this stuff is automated and they just have kind of these scanners or this look. But PE firms, especially depending on how much you have under management, if you're a big PE firm, you're a nice big fat
We're not
juicy
huge,
target.
but we're not huge like a Carlisle or that size.
Right.
But all of our investors, we don't do institutional, it's all high net worth individuals. So that opens the door for more risk because I think when you have a institutional investor, they have more tools in place versus an individual.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it makes a good target actually.
Very good target.
Yeah, so you
100%.
need to have a robust cybersecurity program in place for sure. And
it's
once you get an
it's in pretty
assessment,
good shape.
It's got a lot better, right?
get everything
Absolutely.
done and then do do a penetration test. I did a penetration test on a company on a hedge fund in Florida, and we ended up stealing about 75% of the staff's password. I made a fake portal and tricked the entire staff into logging into it, and I got the CFO's password too. And it was something dumb like I love money with 1974 or something like that. It made me laugh. Like, come on.
I thought that was pretty good.
I mean, it's obvious for a CFO to say, I don't like it.
Worse.
Oh, jeez.
My dad was a CPA and he used to wear a shirt that said happiness is a positive cash flow on it.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've run a business. Happy. I mean, you have negative cash flow make you unhappy
Yeah,
real
that's
quick.
not fun. Definitely not fun.
No.
No.
And I've been in those shoes when I started my own business. You're looking at your bills. You're like, do I pay my kids' health insurance or do I pay my vendors? That's
Well, and that's where we grew out of, because we grew out of being small.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And,
sure.
income and expenses were neck and neck. But as we got larger, my predecessor was like, why do we need cyber insurance? And I took over and I was like, we need cyber insurance, folks. So, yeah, I mean, it's gotten to the point where I hired a firm that does vendor due diligence on the cyber for cybersecurity for our vendors. Because if we're dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
People,
with
portals
the
and
due
that
diligence
kind of-
questionnaires and all that stuff, I've done that. I did that for a bunch of hedge funds up in New York City a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Speaking of risk tolerance, right? People have different tolerances for risks. And what I found about the hedge fund people is they're kind of like people that climb rocks with no ropes. You tell them where all the risks are, and they're like, so, okay. And it's like, hey, I'm pulling 18%. Like, oh yeah, yes you are.
Yeah.
And some other companies have a much lower tolerance for risk. And that all plays into part of, that's all part of this, is what your personal tolerance for risk is.
So the Sentinel line, we got Sentinel,
Yep.
and I got a phone call from, you guys found somebody trying to
Do something.
run a script or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Oh yeah,
It was-
they're trying to learn Python code, and it got flagged by Sentinel-1. And I was like, are they actually trying to run Python code, or?
Yeah.
Like one of yours users?
Yeah, somebody was trying to use their work laptop as their learning laptop for something not
You
work-related.
get credit for effort.
Yeah,
No,
but do it on your own time
Python's
on your
pretty
own
neat.
device.
My older son, he started learning Python when he was 12.
Yeah.
You get a
So-
Raspberry Pi and install, what is that? It's that program developed by Scratch by MIT. It teaches kids conditional logic. So you can learn Python from. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
That's free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So was the employee 12?
I mean, everything gets flagged now, because like, I added a user license on Microsoft for the Power App and the Power Automate.
Mm-hmm.
A phone call from Joe within 5 minutes of getting that license.
Like, are you sure did somebody authorize this?
Because I'm the admin, because I pay the bills. So I was like, yes, I did.
You just got to make sure that there's nothing fishy going on.
Yeah. And so the more we've done, the more it elicits a lot more phone calls and a lot of emails, but
Definitely.
that's okay, because at least I know.
Rather be safe than sorry, right?
Well, and then I know who clicks, like we've set up with KnowBe4.
Mm-hmm.
And we've taken it one step further where you click on it, you get another 15-minute remedial training class.
Nice.
Because it's the same 3 people that click.
I said that.
It's the
Remember-
same 3 people. It
That's
doesn't
why you
matter
were
how
laughing when I
much
was
you-
saying it, because some people are going to keep doing it. And it's just, some people just don't, don't learn.
We have a guy in our firm who I've had to replace his credit card. I can't tell you how many times he's been hacked, just his credit card.
Oh, jeez.
He and all of his children down to age 3 and has 8 kids, all of them have, all of their social security numbers have been compromised. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I don't know what he does.
That's a little odd.
Yeah. I mean, he always gets the brunt of it.
Maybe he's just like Schlepp rocking.
I think he saves stuff from online,
Oh,
in the wrong places, and
something.
maybe has Google save all his passwords. I don't know.
My best guess is that one of his home computers is infected and has a backdoor on it of some kind. And he's, I have insurance through ConnectWise, and I could log into the portal. And then it has, for my insurance provider, it has all my kids' PII on there. So if you have a keylogger on a machine like that, then it would send all that data out. It sounds to me like his home computer is infected.
Something.
So take his home computer off him and smash it to pieces, and he should be fine.
Because he calls me.
Oh, of
Ask
course.
him if he has antivirus on his home computer, and what the deal is.
Yeah, lend him a Sentinel-1 license. See what it finds. Any other questions, guys? Well, thank you, Jason. I think Sharon had some trivia with some prizes, some pretty cool prizes at that. So I will let you take it from here.